tremendous amount of negativity, and my parents knew that somehow met that journalist, and they were approached about trying to forcibly get me to change my beliefs, but my parents never went through with that.
It's good. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Valeria. Welcome to the new episode of our show. And today, our guest is coming all the way from Canada. He is a longtime member of the Unification Church. Pierre, welcome to Dublin.
Thank you.
Really happy to have you here.
It's wonderful to be here.
Nice. So let's dive in.
Okay.
How about we start from the very beginning?
Okay.
Tell me about your personal journey. What was your first encounter with Unification Church?
So my first encounter, to be precise, was in October of '78 in Paris in a coffee shop. I purchased a magazine called Le Nouvel Espoir, which in England they had one called New Tomorrow, same kind of thing. And I purchased it, and I don't know who the person is that sold it to me, because people would ask me, who did you meet? So I didn't really meet anyone. I just purchased a magazine in a coffee shop. And then I was going back to Brussels to go to work, and I was reading it, and there was a speech in there in French, Au cœur des retrouvailles, in English, Heart of Reunion. It's all about East and West coming together. And the thing that attracted me about the magazine was the title was L'âme orientale, the Oriental soul, because I had been studying Buddhism, a bit Hinduism, about the chakras and all this, and I had a Christian rebirth experience. I was reading the New Testament, so I was wondering how can these things come together. And I had met a Catholic priest who told me that for me, God is like a flower, it's like this hippie kind of
That's
mentality.
beautiful.
Very
Yeah.
beautiful, but it didn't satisfy me. I wanted to understand how to reconcile Eastern philosophy and Christianity, how to reconcile this. So when I saw the title with the Oriental woman, L'âme orientale, and Association pour l'unification du christianisme mondial, so obviously it was bringing in those two elements. I was very interested, so I purchased the magazine and I read it. And in that speech, there was a quote, when we do Oriental philosophy, we seek illumination. Ever heard about this?
Yeah.
It's one with universal consciousness. But here I wrote this following quote in this speech there. It says, if the heart of God is not moving within your heart, then you feel empty. So it's focusing on the heart of God. It's not the mind, it's not consciousness, it's the heart. Even though you may be a member of the Unification Church, once the invisible but powerful axis of the heart of God is moved out of you, everything becomes empty. Once the heart of God dwells within you, no matter how lonely you may be, you will be filled and the universe will be filled. A person who is completely filled is a joyful person because he lacks nothing. So that verse, here I am 46 years later, and I'm still struck by this. And I'm still trying to experience this. And I'm still trying to come to feel this heart of God that I want to feel every moment of every day. And in particular, going into the marital union, which should be first and foremost about love, about this union of the human and the divine. And so this is what has animated my life since and continues to animate my life. And I always want to discover this more deeply.
So you already had a lot of a background of studying different religions and different concepts.
Not academically.
Your own research.
Yeah, my own process. It started in 1976. My elder sister, who now passed away to spirit world, to the eternal world, at the age of 64, very young. She had met a German man in a train who had given her a book on theosophy. Maybe you're familiar, I don't know if you're familiar with theosophy, but essentially it's the study of the chakras, the energy centers. So it's like a German systematic analysis of Hinduism, you could say.
Mm.
And that really got me interested and got me back to be interested in spirituality, because I had sort of abandoned my Catholic faith at the tender age of 8 years old. Because I was with some nuns in a school, and they told me that if you do the Stations of the Cross every first Friday of the month for 7 months in a row, your place in heaven is guaranteed. And I thought, that's ridiculous. I can't believe such a thing. So I gave up on the Catholic Church at 8 years old, essentially. I gave up. It was not interesting for me. I wasn't atheist per se, but it's just, no, I was just a worldly person, and not so interested.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, all these religions and different concepts of the way people see this world, let's say, they all have God as a part of this thought, or God or universe, or the energy, right? But you mentioned that the heart of God is something that struck you the most.
Yes.
So let's dive into it. What is God, or a concept of divine, in the unification theology, in unification thought?
Well, we could say, we talk about, of course, that God is a being that has experienced pain, and this is very different from what most people think, that God is totally in control and mastermind and all kinds of various views, but that God is sad by all the difficulties humans go through is not something that most people identify with. So that's a view of God. God is, and another thing about God is that we come to experience that God is not just a father, but is a mother. And there is someone that I'm sure many people know, because she's a longtime journalist with the Washington Times. Her name is Cheryl Wetstein. She had an experience in 1982 where her spirit left her body, and she met God the Mother. She was actually, believe it or not, breastfed by God the Mother. And she felt like the liquid love of God. She was going through terrible difficulties, and she felt healed of her trauma and difficulty by that love. And then God Mother handed her to God the Father. So we have this notion that God has both a masculine and a feminine nature, a motherly and a fatherly nature. While at the same time, we're not polytheists or believe that there's two gods. Really, there's one God who has both a masculine and a feminine nature. So so that's the identity of God. And so there's that's the main thing about God.
That's the view on God in this type of thought. Yeah, that's very interesting. It's very interesting. I have one more question on this topic, though, because I know that's what the person that is not in the church usually wonders about. People who joined, who made this choice. If you could narrow it down to one sentence or one thought, what is this in the unification ideology that you heard or you saw or you experienced, and you thought, I will change my life. I will build my life from now on based on this ideology?
Yeah, well, of course, on January 1st, 1979, I decided to join this organization. And which meant I had just finished university. I was going to go and have a career, looking for a job. I had taken a training, and so it's a big decision to take. It's completely counterintuitive, let's say, to let all of this behind and to follow. So I really felt that God was asking me to do this. We've heard before, people became a priest, let's say, a Catholic priest and so on, because they received the call of God. So they have an experience of believing that God is calling them. And so when you feel that you think that God has called you, you think that if you don't respond to that call, you're going to lose something of that relationship with God. It will not be the same. So I wanted to, that's why I responded and did this. And it wasn't easy, because there was a lot of negative information in the press at the time in 1978, with various items in the news that were made for a lot of negative information towards our organization. I was not really aware of it, but when I came back to Canada, it was panic in my family.
I can imagine that. Yeah, well,
And,
you mentioned a lot of counter information, different types of information in the media about this church and this movement. And I've heard that to father or to parents, the founders of the movement,
yeah.
they're very people see them as a very different type of people. Another question. You mentioned different types of information in media about Unification Church. And I've heard that the founders of the church, Reverend Moon, has very different opinions on him in the social media and press as well. So what place do the founders of the Unification Church movement play in the ideology, in the life of a community, etc.?
Well, there is the founders, Reverend and Mrs. Moon, are called true parents by members. And this is a source of much heartache for parents of people like me that decide to join the church. So for my parents, it's like, when they're told that their son believes that such and such is their true parents. So this is very difficult. And so when I joined, it's not like I was rejecting my parents why I joined. But so I joined because the explanation of the divine principle for me was an explanation that was completing my search, if you want. And it was a complete understanding of truth, which is something that is always continually evolving. But at that time, though, there was tremendous negative media, not social media, it did not exist at the time.
That's true.
But there was very negative media because of the Jim Jones experience in Guyana. So that was in the news. It was a horrible event that happened. And then there was also in Canada, there was CBC, Canada Broadcasting Corporation, had a journalist who had gone to California and went to kidnap one of his friends, Benji Carroll. And based on that, they made some series of articles in the Montreal Star, and a movie came out of it called Ticket to Heaven. And
wow.
And there was tremendous amount of negativity. And my parents knew that somehow met that journalist, and they were approached about trying to forcibly get me to change my beliefs. But my parents never went through with that because I come from a legal background. My father is a notary, which you may not know in parts of the world what is a notary, but it's like a title attorney, if you want. And so was my grandfather and great-grandfather. And so they're people of great integrity, and they don't see that as something correct, something to do. So they didn't do that. And I was very grateful for this. But there was tremendous amount of fear at that time because many people were forcibly kidnapped by people who convinced the parents of members to pay them huge amounts of money to do that and to force them essentially to do what they accused the church of doing, that we were brainwashing people. They were forcibly, confining people and bombarding them with all kinds of stuff, and sometimes going as far as trying to lure them with sexuality, with a girlfriend or whatever, trying to force them in that direction. It went as far as that. So that's the context in which I joined. It was very difficult, and that created great tension within me because for many years after I joined the Unification movement, whenever I would talk to my parents, it was a very heavy feeling because this was in the air. And now this thing is of the past, and now it's fine. But for many years, it was like that.
It sounds like a big sacrifice.
Well, yeah. If I look at it from my parents' point of view, I had finished university and went to Europe, and I come back and I gave up my career and I joined this unification movement, and I went to be a full-time volunteer from '79 until I came back from UTS in '89 to Canada. Those years, I was just like full-on, missionary, so to speak. Not pursuing anything professional from the perspective of my studies. Later, I became a financial advisor after I came back to Canada, and I just finished. I'm retired from a career as a financial planner, but that came much later, and so I did put that education to good use
And then,
in the
yeah,
end. Yes.
that's true. But it takes a lot of strength of a character even to go against this. What I hear is a avalanche of negativity in media, and everything around you is basically filled with this concepts of.
Well, for me, it is so evident that God asked me to follow this way that it's like I could not go against that. And whether it's really strength of character, well, I appreciate the compliment, but I think it's more I can now turn away from my faith experience, from that relationship, from that experience of God asking me to follow this way, and the airtight, what I consider airtight teaching, which is the divine principle. And I think a lot of people who came and went of the unification movement, they cannot get rid of this divine principle. If people who are listening to this are curious, if they read it, they will see it's very well, it's quite comprehensive and complete teaching.
Yeah, and it sounds like it gave you a really big sense of purpose. I think a lot of young people in these days would envy this type of calling, as you put it, right? That you felt at that time.
Yes, it's a calling to be part of what we consider an eschatological movement, that there is a good world coming, and that this plays a very important part in this. And many members of the unification movement were involved in fighting communism, and we saw the fall of communism. And you're from Moscow, so you know about this.
I am. Pierre, you mentioned that you kind of gave up your youth going around volunteering and doing a lot of peace projects, but eventually you got it together, as your parents would probably maybe put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you settled and you got your career and your
Yes.
family.
Yes.
So, and you mentioned some girlfriends that were used as the way to lure people back out of the church. So, what is the Unification Church or Unification Movement view on relationship? Family, is it reflected in the way you built your family?
Well, this core is a core part of the teaching, and we talk about, and the teaching of divine principle talk about the three blessings. The second one being establishing an ideal family, which is relationship, man and woman, with God and the children. And this whole idea is the goal, that we can establish a world composed of ideal families, or families becoming ideal. And so it is I would say, a very, very strong motivation. And it hasn't been easy for me, because perhaps people have heard that Reverend Moon mashed people, and that people would be mashed and then go to participate in these big mass blessings. I did that twice, and where it didn't work. And my wife, I met in 1997. She immigrated from another country, and I met her at our headquarters of our organization by chance. And then I pursued her, and we became I was not matched by Reverend Moon. We just decided, and we just agreed with the church leaders that we can be married and become a couple.
You mentioned a lot about your family and the life your family is leading. And I'm curious, as a part of a family or you personally, how do your religious commitments, maybe traditions or rituals, I don't know, change your daily life? Like, how does it make it different from any other regular person's life?
There's a lot of people of faith who have a daily devotional practice. So I'm really into that. Every morning I spend time early morning, and honestly, more by myself. My wife is not so much into it. She says that her prayer is her action, her prayer is her garden, So we all have different approaches to how we connect with God. Some people are more in prayer and devotional, and some people are more in communion with nature, for example. But we're all communing with God. So we want God to be a part of our life, of everything we do. We want to bring God into every relationship that we have. So I would say that's the answer to that question for me.
So what would be your devotions? What would you say? What activities in your life, if that's a garden for your wife, for example, what activities do bring God and His presence in your life these days?
Well, every morning at 6 a.m., with other people from my faith community, we meet on Zoom. This is the Zoom era.
The magic of technology.
And we study some words, and we share together, and we pray together. So that's what I do daily.
Every day in the morning?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a very interesting way to start your day. And since we're talking about traditions and, let's face it, religion, right? I can't not ask you about the other religions. There's a lot of differences I've heard already from you. I'm coming from an Orthodox background, so I already noticed some differences. So you can't say there's not a disagreement, between Unification Church and other teachings. What is your view on that?
Well, I studied at the Unification Theological Seminary where I had a Jewish rabbi, an Orthodox priest, a Greek Orthodox priest, and I had a Protestant minister. I had a Buddhist monk. So the Unification movement is very much committed to the harmony of all people of all faiths. And we even want to include people of conscience, meaning even if they don't have a faith. And something else that I've been becoming more and more interested in is neuroscience. And that science, there's a new post-materialist science, and in England there's something called the Science and Medical Network, which gathers scientists who are interested in this view of life. And I think science can also be a way to God, a new kind of science that is, let's say, going beyond the materialistic science while recognizing the accomplishments of materialistic science. So science and all religions should work together, and we can all communicate together. You mentioned your Orthodox upbringing. The Russian Orthodox is very much into mysticism, I think. But somewhere we meet in this. And so I appreciate that part.
Wow. So it is really about unification, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So the fact that something might be different from Unification movement's teachings, it doesn't mean it's wrong, is it?
Absolutely not.
Yes. Would you say it embraces a lot of traditions?
I think we can all be enriched by someone else's religious experience, trying to see and feel from her perspective or his perspective what he's experiencing. You can discover new aspects and broaden your own understanding of the religious experience to talk about it in that way. A bit like William James had a book called about the religious experience in the late 1800s, I think. So we need to learn from one another. There should be no such thing as religious war. It's a total nonsense.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, it looks like a very diverse choice there, right, in the Unification Church. Yeah, that's a great answer. And maybe to finish up our interview for our audience, the question, what is happening now? It's not very easy to find information about Unification Church activity. What would be the projects or teachings or maybe new publishings that you find inspiring or exciting these days within the Unification community?
Well, that's a good question. We have Universal Peace Federation, which is an offshoot, if you want, more the social arm of the Unification movement. So if you go to upf.org, you can see all kinds of activities that are being done in the world of media, in the world of academics, in the world of parliamentarians. So we're trying to find applications to that. That's what comes to mind.
Yeah, nice. That's very interesting. I'm looking forward to finding out more about that. Thank you, Pierre.
Okay, thank you.
Pierre, we covered a lot, even shortly, we covered a lot of periods of your life already. We talked about crazy, I can't put it otherwise, experience of your youth and so many activities you took part in, your family life. And now you mentioned that you're retired. Like, life is still going on. You're traveling, we see. You're here with us in Ireland. So what is it that you're doing in your personal life? Any projects that inspire you right now?
So since 2016, I became very interested in the problem of pornography. That is addictive, and that's creating difficulties in many marriages and individuals' lives. And so I became involved with an organization connected to, loosely connected, not directly, with the Unification movement, which is to help people to overcome this addiction. So I've been doing that, but in the process, and I'm still doing that, I'm still meeting some men. I meet with the older men, and there's a lot of younger people, and we're trying to perfect sexuality because it should be a cause for rejoicing, for love, for only goodness should come out of it. But we know that there's a lot of problem in the world. And when I was interested in this, got involved into how to protect children from accessing pornography online. And I started a petition, which was with two other ladies that I know in Quebec, which was presented in the National Assembly, the provincial government. And someone from a Canadian organization took notice of this and appreciated that, and so asked me to go to Washington, D.C. to an international conference by the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. When I was there in 2018, I heard one person speaking about age verification legislation, which started under Prime Minister David Cameron in 2017 with the Digital Economy Act, and which unfortunately, I don't want to get into the reasons why, but it was kind of sidetracked, but now it's back online. And I met a senator, Canadian senator, at a protest in front of the biggest porn company in the world called Pornhub, owned by MindGeek. And on March 8, 2020, March 8, you should know very well, and March 8 is International Women's Day.
Yes.
And so I gave her a paper to ask her if she could be interested in this, and age verification. And so I said, you can look at it later. It's not the time right now. And then her assistant called me and we met, and she took it on. And now there's a bill going through the House of Commons in Canada after her having pushed it successfully through the Senate. Now it's being studied by a committee of the House of Commons. And if all goes well, within a few months, we may have a bill in Canada to enact age verification, which means the real process is to verify the age of people before they go online to see pornography, which is more and more documented how much harm is being done to children, and that the harms are egregious, incredible, and it's more and more people realizing it, because internet is something that is very recent, and we're just starting to realize how this completely changed everything. Internet changed everything, and we're in the process of learning the harms and trying to find ways to protect ourselves. And that's what I've been involved in. And that's what I've been doing actively, even more so since I'm retired, but since a bit before I retired in 2016. Yeah.
You started doing it. That
Yeah.
sounds so inspiring. That's a real problem these days, and I agree that cyber security, especially for kids, is a thing that has to be done as soon as possible. But where does this interest come from? Because as we know, religions have a very similar look on sexuality and relationships and purity, as they call it. So would it be similar in the unification movement, or?
Well, when we deal with pornography addiction, there are two approaches, a faith-based and non-faith-based. So I was trained by a Christian person in the United States with other people, and we have a faith-based approach, but we adopted it to our own particular teaching. Like I said before, Divine Principle is very comprehensive teaching. So we're dealing with the people who are within this community, and we want them to be models, because this is the key to changing this world, I believe. We understand through the teachings that it started with sexuality in the Garden of Eden went wrong. Without getting into the whole teachings, that's one of the keys of the teachings.
That is true.
So we got to get it right. And when we can create a real ideal world.
Thank you, Pierre. I think it's been a real pleasure for our audience, and it's been my pleasure to have you here today. We uncovered just a little bit of truth about such a big deal, and thank you for being with us here. I hope we can have you here again, maybe later. You're going to come by. But yeah, thank you for everything.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Valeria. This is a great start to my visit in Ireland.
Indeed.
Very happy with this.
Indeed. Thank you.